There's a moment in every great horror game where something shifts. Not a jump scare, not a loud noise, something underneath the game changes. And you feel it before you even explain it. Maybe it's an engine screen that's different from the last time you opened it. Maybe it's a character who starts talking directly to you. Maybe it's an Atari-looking pixel priest holding up a crucifix while a fully rotoscoped demon crawls up. Maybe it's an Atari-looking pixel priest holding up a crucifix while a fully rotoscoped demon crawls towards you on all fours. And you think, wait, that should even be scary. The graphics like they came out in 1983, but yet it still is. It's honestly terrifying. And that right there is why indie games have quietly taken over the horror genre. Not with massive budgets, not with photorealistic graphics, but with ideas, with atmosphere, with the kind of creative risk that a boardroom full of executives would never, ever greenlight. But here's the thing that nobody wants to talk about. For every indie horror game that earns its darkness, that treats its subject matter with the weight it deserves, there's another one that doesn't. Like 100 that doesn't. Games that use trauma as a set dressing. Creators whose real lives contradict the very meaning their games are trying to sell, if there is a meaning to begin with. In a culture that started to confuse disturbing with good. So today, I want to talk about both sides. The games that prove indie horror is the future, and the ones that threaten to poison the well. Hello everybody, my name is Angel, or Enlightened, and today we're talking about indie horror games. Let's start with the wins. The games that you don't just use darks. The games that didn't just use darks. The games that didn't just use dark subject matter, they earned it. These are the ones that tricked you, challenged you, and left you thinking about them for weeks. Not because they showed you something awful, but because they understood why something was awful. You cannot have this conversation without Doki Doki Literature Club. It changed the game. Literally, like it changed its own game. On the surface, at least how I saw it, it was just a dating sim. You join a cute little high school literature club, you write poems, you pick your favorite girl, the music is cheerful, the art is bright, it's aggressively wholesome, and then Sayuri dies. Just like that. Not in a dramatic way, the game just breaks. Music distorts, save files corrupts, characters start acknowledging that they're inside of a game. And one of them, Monica, starts deleting others from the code. What Dan Salvato did with DDLC was prove something that the entire AAA horror industry had been ignoring. I know I can't speak, chill on me. The most terrifying thing you can do in a video game is break the fourth wall so hard that the player doesn't feel safe anymore. Not in the game world, but at their desk, in their own room. Monica doesn't just talk to the player character. She talks to you. She references your computer name. She knows when you're recording. She manipulates the game files. And the game expects you to actually go into your file explorer and delete her. That's not a mechanic. That's an experience. That's a whole different world. A massive studio would have never let that ride. There would have been focus groups, market testing, we had a third-person shooter option. But no. Dan made this in his bedroom, put it out for free, and it became one of the most influential horror games of the decade. But here's what matters for this video specifically. DDLC deals with depression, self-harm, and suicide, and it handles those topics with genuine care. The horror isn't that Sayuri is depressed. The horror, in my eyes, is the game's own systems. Monica's manipulation of the code are exploiting that vulnerability. In my eyes, the game's a commentary on how systems of control, holy snap, on how systems of control prey on the most fragile people. There's a reason it opens with a concept warning. There's a reason it provides mental health resources. Dan understood that he was touching something very real, and he respected it. That distinction matters. Remember for later. If Doki Doki proved you don't need good graphics to be terrifying, Faith took that concept, drove it to a rural corner in Connecticut in 1986, and performed the exorcism on it 6 times, and shot it in the back of the head. Faith looks like an Atari 2600 game. Chunky, blocky, pixels. Your character's a tiny white figure holding up a cross. The environments are flat, minimalistic, and almost childlike. And then, the rotoscope animations kick in. I know you see it on TikTok, you get tired of it, it's overplayed. But when you've played in this game, it feels different. It feels real in a wrong way. Developer Erdorf did something genuinely brilliant. The regular gameplay looks retro, lo-fi, but every time a demon appears, every time something truly horrible happens, it's rendered in a handcrafted rotoscope animation. Fluid, detailed, deeply unsettling. The contrast between those two visual styles create constant tension. You're walking through crude pixel environments and your brain is waiting for the rotoscope to hit. because when it hits, it's never good, but it looks amazing. The story follows Father John Ward as he returns to the site of a failed exorcism, and across 3 chapters, it spirals into a massive conspiracy involving satanic cults, demonic possessions, and a looming apocalyptic Sabbath. The Lord's Dance, hidden notes, multiple endings, secret boss fights, all wrapped in a 1980s satanic panic aesthetic. Why do I put tongue twisters in my script? Played completely script. Sorry about that. No winks to the camera, no ironic distance. Faith asks you to believe in this word the same way Father Ward believes in his crucifix. And somehow, despite looking like it was made on a calculator, it works. Airdorf made a game where you fight demons with the power of Christ, rendered in 8-bit graphics with speech-synthesized demon voices that sound like they were channeled through a broken speaking spell. And it's one of the scariest games I've ever played. Seriously, it's great. You should try it out. Some of his content gets incredibly dark. We're talking cult rituals We're talking cult Some of his content gets incredibly dark. We're talking cult rituals involving infants, gently depraved imagery, but the game earns it because the horror serves the story. Every disturbing image has a narrative purpose. It's not just trying to make you flinch, it's building a world where the darkness has weight and consequence. Remember those words. Now throw everything I just said out the window. We're talking about a game that has no story. At least it shouldn't have, but we made the story. Buckshot Roulette is on paper the simplest game on this list. You sit at a table across from a dealer. Between you is a shotgun loaded with a random mix of live rounds and blanks. You take turns, point at yourself or at them. Pull the trigger, that's it. The game takes maybe 20 minutes. There's essentially no narrative. Character Mike, I cannot pronounce his name. I'm so sorry, so I'll just call him his first name, Mike, has openly said in interviews that Buckshot Roulette has almost no lore. He set out to make a game of Russian roulette with a shotgun. No backstory, no deep mythology. And yet, the community made lore. Wiki pages went up, analysis videos dropped, people started connecting Buckshot Roulette to Mike's other projects. Particularly, I think let's say that word, Tartarus Engine from his Unsorted Horror collection. About a machine that simulates time dilation to trap people in loops of endless psychological torture. Fans theorize that the dealer, the nightclub, all of it is happening inside that said machine. That you can't actually die because you're trapped in simulation. That the doctor who revives you between rounds is just a system reminding you that escape isn't an option. There's even a general release of liability form you signed at the start, dated January 22nd, 2018. Why'd I write it like that? Dated the 22nd of January, 2018. With what appears to be God's name on it. Fans connected this to Einstein's famous quote, "God doesn't play dice." Buckshot Roulette is literally a game about probability, and someone, maybe God, signed off on it and lost. Is any of this canon? Probably not, but that's the point. The absence of explanation becomes the horror. AAA studios over-explain everything. Every mystery gets a codex entry, every ambiguity, I can't say that word, this is the second take, and every ambiguity, giggity bitch, shut the fuck. That's a cutscene. Buckshot Roulette proves that sometimes the most powerful thing a horror game can do is just not tell you. And then here's the most recent example. Maybe the purest distillation of everything we talked about so far. No, I'm Not Human dropped in September 2025 and immediately blew up, peaking at over 124,000 concurrent Twitch viewers within days. Developed by a small Russian studio called Skaz, published by Critical Reflex, the same publisher behind Mouthwashing and Buckshot Roulette. They clearly have a type. The premise is anxiety in game form. The sun has become a deadly laser. During the day, you hide. At night, people come to your door begging for shelter. Some are human, some are not. Creatures that look, talk, and smell like us, but just aren't. You interrogate them, check their teeth, look at their eyes, inspect their fingernails. You learn new tales each night through news broadcasts. But some traits appear in both humans and visitors. The game never gives you certainty, only probability, and it forces you to act on it. Let someone who's a visitor, they murder your other guests in the night, then they will run away. The loneliness makes you vulnerable to other things. The game forces you to walk a tightrope between trust and paranoia, and never lets you feel safe about your decisions, any of them. Once again, a story with multiple endings, branching paths, choices with actual weight, and the game deliberately never fully explains what a visitor is. Just like Buckshot Roulette, the ambiguity, I'm never playing that word in another script. Is the point. Look at the budget for the thing. It's a door, a conversation, a choice, and it's one of the best horror games of this year. So those were the success stories. Indie games that took creative risks, treated their subject matter with respect, and proved that horror doesn't need $100 million budget. Just a good idea and they got to follow through on it. There's another side to the story, and I think it's one we need to talk about, honestly. Because the same freedom that lets indie developers take brilliant, boundary-pushing horror also lets them make careless, exploitative horror. And sometimes the person making the game about trauma is the last person who should be telling that story. Let me be clear. I'm not arguing that horror games shouldn't deal with dark subjects. They absolutely should. Abuse, trauma, grief. These are essential subjects for horror because horror is one of the few genres that make you feel the weight of those experiences rather than just intellectualizing them. The problem isn't darkness. The problem is when darkness becomes the product. When a game uses child abuse or sexual assault not to say something meaningful about those experiences, but to generate a reaction, to be clipped, screened, and turned into a thumbnail. When shock value replaces substance, and when the people making these games reveal through their own actions that they're never really understand the gravity of what they're depicting. Let's start with the elephant in the room. Bad Parenting. It's a short horror indie game about a child named Ron who lives with an abusive father. The father's abuse is manifested through a terrifying figure called Mr. Redface, a Santa Claus-like monster that represents the trauma Ron experiences. The game is about 20-something minutes long, it's free, and when it came out, it blew up, like insanely. Speed played it, Corey X Kenshin played it, Jacksepticeye played it. It became one of the most watched indie horror games of 2024. That was 2024? Jesus, I feel old. And on the surface, yeah, the imagery is striking. The concept of a child's trauma being visualized as a monster is compelling. But even before the controversy, to me, if you looked at it critically, something felt hollow. The game takes one of the most horrifying realities a child can experience, parental abuse and murder, and reduces it to about 20 minutes of jump-scare driven horror, with very little actual exploration. It's sensationalized. The horror isn't understanding Ron's pain, it's in watching the scary thing happen. The topic is heavy, but the treatment is shallow. It uses child abuse as a set dressing for a spooky short film. And then the creator's real life made it much, much worse. In January 2025, documents surfaced. Screenshots from the game's own Discord server alleging that On, then 22 years old, had been grooming a 14-year-old girl. The documents detailed inappropriate messages, romantic escalation, and deeply concerning behavior. On's own response then denied the screenshots. Instead, he shifted blame, like a coward, framed the behavior as jokes, and he chose to talk to a child because they don't judge. Jack deleted his playthrough, the gaming community were cruel, On eventually stepped away from development, handing the sequel's production to another team. And here's where this connects to a larger point. A game about child abuse made by someone incredibly accused of the same thing, but not to the same extent, isn't just irony, it's uncomfortable. It poisons everything the game was trying to say, if the game was trying to say anything at all. And that's where my question lies. When a game treats a dark subject matter with the depth of a TikTok jump scare and the creator's own behavior contradicts the very premise, was the game ever actually about child abuse? Or was the child abuse just the most effective way to generate a reaction? This section, me, my roommate, and my girlfriend talked about this for a while. The game's well written, but Lord do I hate this. This one's more complicated, and I want to be fair to it, because unlike Bad Parenting, the call from Andy and Lele is genuinely well written. The character dynamics are compelling, their branching narrative actually works. On the surface, it's impressive. But it gets so much worse than this. Telltale follows siblings Andrew and Ashley Graves. They're trapped in a core team that resort to cannibalism, they get tangled up in demonic rituals, and the relationship between them, there's no better way to say this, is incestuous and disgusting. Ashley is obsessive, manipulative, and codependent towards her own brother in ways that blur and eventually cross the line between familial love and something deeply, deeply inappropriate and disgusting. Now, defenders, which there shouldn't be any, will say, sort of correctly, that the game shows this as toxic. Andrew's confidence is destroyed by Ashley's control, the relationship is depicted as damaging, the game doesn't put a bow on it and say, this is fine, but at the same time, it doesn't say this is bad. Besides their parents, before they were murdered and eaten, the world around them doesn't really care about their actions. Yes, they're on the run, but not for being an incestuous, disgusting freak, but because they escaped a burning building. Nobody besides their parents looks at the relationship and says, this is wrong. Nobody besides their parents even looks at their relationship, besides us. There are routes where the sibling dynamic gets worse, and routes where it gets better, if you can even say that. Where they reconcile, where their toxicity is softened, where the game seems to be saying the relationship is broken, but maybe it can be fixed. And in some readings, fixed means they end up together, having sex. The game flips the coin on the topic from scene to scene. One moment is devastating portrayal of codependency, the next is playing the incest for an awkward punchline that never really lands. And then we get to Nemle, the developer. On many occasions, they have posted art, official art, of the siblings in cutesy romantic contexts. There are Patreon exclusive illustrations, the line between depicting something as toxic within the story and marketing that toxicity as appealing outside the story. When the creator of a game about an abusive, incestuous dynamic is producing promotional content that makes the dynamic look cute, it's fair to ask, is the game critiquing the relationship, or is the critique just plausible deniability? I'm not saying Toku is a bad game. I kinda am. I don't like it. I'm saying the relationship between the game's text and the creator's paratext becomes a problem. The game says one thing, and the creator's outside behavior completely contradicts that, destroying it, pissing on it, and setting it on fire. Somehow, by the graces of the ancient Babylonian demon Moloch, the game has a 98% positive review on Steam. Over 31,000 of them. It's a massive success, sadly. And part of the reason is that the game's fandom has, and in many cases, embraced the elements that the game was supposedly critiquing. The incest isn't treated as horror. It becomes the ship. They're shipping the siblings. And while you can't blame the creator for what their fans do, you can't look at official art, the marketing choices, and the tonal inconsistencies, and ask whether the game is really doing the work it claims to be doing. Let's back up a little bit. Take a backflip. Back to 2004. And let's talk about a game that in many ways started this entire conversation about indie horror and dark subject matter, in my opinion. You could disagree with me. Am I gonna let you? No. Yume Nikki, made by a single developer only known as Kikiyama, is one of the most important indie game ever created. You play as Matsusuki, a girl who refuses to leave her apartment, and the only thing you can do is go to sleep and explore her dreams. There are no enemies, no combat, no dialogue, no objective. You just wander. And the dreams are wrong. Surreal in a way that feels less fantasy and more like your subconscious is trying to warn you about something. Repeating staircases to nowhere, vast empty landscapes with a single figure, a room full of mouths, an iconic character called Yubo, I don't know how to say their name. A smiling static face that appears randomly and traps you in an inescapable nightmare void. Critically, the game's only ending is Matsusuki walking onto her apartment balcony and jumping to her death. That doesn't feel right, but it is the ending that you led to. Yume Nikki is devastating. It's haunting, and it's raised a question. When a game about mental illness ends with suicide and offers no alternative, no hope, no path forward, is that honest or just plain irresponsible? I want to be very clear before you guys. I think Yume Nikki is a masterpiece. The atmosphere is unlike anything else in gaming. The fact that one anonymous developer created something this emotionally resonant and then essentially disappeared is remarkable. But like I said earlier, Yume Nikki only has one ending. I don't know if I kept that part in, so I don't know if I said that earlier. But there's only one ending, and it's suicide. There's no recovery routes, no good ending. No resources, no content warning. The game presents Matsusuki's isolation, her pain, and her death as a closed loop. Something you cannot escape from. Something inevitable. And while that's a valid artistic choice, it also sets a template. It tells the next generation of horror developers, this is how you handle mental illness. You should show the suffering. You show the tragedy. You don't show the way out. Compared to DDLC, which deals with similar themes but explicitly includes mental health resources and makes the horror about the system that exploits vulnerability, not about the vulnerability itself. Or compared to Amori, a game directly inspired by Yume Nikki, and one I wanted to put in this video but eventually didn't decide to, that offers multiple endings, including ones where the protagonist chooses to confront his trauma and survive. Those games learn from Yume Nikki's power, but also interrogated some limitations. Yume Nikki wasn't the problem, nor did it create the problem. But it did prove that you could make something achingly beautiful out of someone's worst moments. A lot of the developers who came after took the aching beauty part without doing the work to earn it. This is the legacy that leads to games like Bad Parenting. The lesson where something supposed to be dark subject matter requires deep craft and genuine empathy. What a lot of developers heard instead was, dark subject matter equals emotional impact, and emotional impact equals success, equals money. Or money, like I said in my last video. Kill me. So where does that put us? Indie horror is, without a question, the most exciting space in gaming right now. You can't disagree with me. I will not allow you. Get the hell out of my video. The games on the bright side of this video: DDLC, Faith, Buckshot Roulette, No I'm Not Human. No I'm Not a Human. Why can't I speak? The proof that a single person or a tiny team with a good idea can create something that rivals or surpasses anything a AAA studio can produce. The creative freedom of any development is the genre's greatest asset, but that freedom is also a double-edged sword. There's a comicbook.com article that you probably haven't read from mid-2025 that puts it really well. The author looks at the state of indie horror games from 2024, mouthwashing, bad parenting, the whole, and it points out that child abuse, sexual assault, cannibalism, and trauma-coded imagery have become rampant in indie horror, and these games are being consumed overwhelmingly through YouTube and Twitch, and TikTok. I hate TikTok. With the primary audience skews young. Kids are watching these games, they're engaging with the fan communities around them, and the fan communities are in some cases completely attaching to dark themes from their intended context. For example, a game I originally had in the script, Mouthwashing, their community, a game about a rapist who destroys everything around him rather than face accountability, and parts of the fandom are drawing sexy fan art of Jimmy, romanticizing the abuser, treating Anya the victim as an afterthought, some not even caring about her at all. The game itself handles the themes brilliantly, but the culture around the game is doing the exact opposite. And when you have games like Bad Parenting, in my opinion, where the themes are already shallow, where the creator's own behavior undermines the message, you get a perfect storm. Sensitive topics treated as content, trauma as performance, horror that says, hey, look how dark I am, without ever asking, what does this darkness mean? It's like Darth Vader. Anyways, the indie horror scene doesn't need to sanitize itself. It doesn't need to stop making challenging, uncomfortable games. What it needs is intentionality. It needs creators who ask themselves, am I depicting this experience because I have something to say about it? Or am I depicting it because I know will get a reaction? Tocal. Every game on the bright side of this video answers that question honestly. Dan Salvato has something to say about how systems control explicit vulnerable people. Erdorf had something to say about faith in the face of real evil. Mike understood that absence of meaning can be something meaningful. No I'm Not Human has something to say about paranoia and the cost of truth. The games on the dark side, some of them have something to say, I hope, but they can't get out of their own way. The creator's actions, the tonal inconsistencies, the shallow treatment of heavyweight topics, it all undermines whatever the game might be trying to say. And as indie horror continues to grow, as it continues to take over the genre, this is the line that the community has to walk. Because the same lack of gatekeeping that lets a masterpiece like Faith exist also lets a game use child abuse as jump scare fuel while the developer grooms a teenager on his own Discord server. The freedom is the feature, but it's also the responsibility. If you made it to the end of this video, first of all, thank you, genuinely. This is a topic I've been wanting to talk about for the longest. And thanks to a YouTuber like Definitely Bored Oranges gave me the confidence to do so. I love indie horror, and it's the most creative, the most daring, the most human corner of gaming industry right now. And because I love it, I think it's worth being honest about the parts that aren't working. Not to tear it down, but because it deserves better than shock value or hypocrisy. Tocal. If you haven't played any of the games from the bright side, start there. DDLC is free. Buckshot Roulette has a free demo. Faith is dirt cheap and you should really play it. They'll all remind you why this genre matters. And if you got thoughts, which you should, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, which you probably will, I want to hear it. Seriously. Like, subscribe, do something. I'll see you in the next one. You've been enlightened.